It's a joy to be back at Ivy Hall. I was saying to my wife, I'm staying in the guest room at the top floor here, which is very, very pleasant. And my wife and I stayed there, I think within a year or so, maybe 2 years of our marriage. So my wife's American. I moved to the States 4 days before 9/11, so September 7th, 2001. We were married the previous April, so my wife lived in England for 4 months. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we stayed up in Ivy Hall our first time here about 20 years ago. I know that because our son, who's now 22, was a toddler. And this is typically between a good mother and a bad father. Because she said, oh yeah, I remember that well. Leo had a fever. Our son had a fever. I remember nothing about that at all. I remember having a good time with the people here, but I don't remember our son having a fever. But so I've been back 2 or 3 times since. It's always a joy, and just walking around the different rooms. And John Haas's library is something else. 8,000 volumes, mostly theology. I mean, that's a significant research library in itself. But I get a sense of deja vu. So it's good to be back. It's good to see some old friends. Several of you I've met either here before or in other places before. So I'm going to speak today on Beauteous truth, faith, reason, literature and culture. And just to show how efficient I am, GK Chesterton said, if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. That I wrote a book called Beauteous Truth, Faith, Reason, Literature and Culture. The cover image is on the promotional material you've got to come here, and we don't have any copies of that book to sell here because I haven't brought any with me. So, but there are plenty of other different ones. So, beauteous truth. This is beauteous as an adjective, E-O-U-S. And this is a play on the words of the famous poet John Keats, as I'm sure some of you know. Beauteous truth, truth is beauty. What does that mean? And is it true? Is it beautiful? Well, it depends. If we believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then truth is just what I believe to be true. And beauty is what I believe to be beautiful, which means really there's no such thing as truth objectively speaking or beauty objectively speaking. It's all about me. It's narcissistic. So that we're going to look at a beauteous truth within the context of its objective reality, its place within the cosmos. And I'm going to begin with a paradox. I'm going to begin with a few paradoxes because I think it's very important for us to understand we're living in a world of mystery, which is nonetheless subject to reason. The humble shall be exalted. The meek shall inherit the earth. Or the first shall be last and the last shall be first. GK Chesterton said that a paradox is an apparent contradiction that points to a deeper truth. An apparent contradiction that points to a deeper truth. So on a literal level, if you can only see things on a literal level, the first shall be last and the last shall be first is nonsense. Right? Jesus Christ, no less, is enunciating nonsense. Because, of course, the first isn't last, by definition. And the last isn't first, by definition. An apparent contradiction points to a deeper truth. We're going to come to that. But I'm going to invite the devil into the room. You don't mind if I invite the devil into the room for a few moments, do you? He's outnumbered, so we're good. One moment, hang on. You Christians, you believe in arrant nonsense. We could mention, as the previous speaker has just mentioned, the first shall be last and last shall be first. Could also mention the Trinity. What arrant nonsense the Trinity is. Even a 1-year-old knows that 1 isn't 3 and 3 isn't 1. You believe in ludicrous, illogical rubbish. That's enough of the devil. There we are. Do you see the halo? That's either, my wife said, that's either your bald spot or the fact that your head's too big. And I said, yes, that's why the halo rubs. So let's look at this. The Trinity. Now, we talk about beauteous truth, the good, the true, and the beautiful. We're going to get there. But the Holy Trinity. In the novel Brideshead Revisited, the character Charles Ryder turns his back on Brideshead for what he thinks will be the last time. The name Brideshead, who's the brideshead? The bridegroom. The house in the novel serves as a metaphor, as a symbol for the church, for the mystical body of Christ, the bride's head. So when Charles turns his back on Brideshead for what he thinks is the last time, he says, I have ceased believing in illusion. Jesus Christ, the church, the Trinity. Henceforth, he says, I will believe only in 3 dimensions perceived with my 5 senses. And I don't know a more succinct definition of atheism than that. There is nothing but 3 dimensions which we perceive with our 5 senses. That's it. What follows in the novel, by the way, the narrator, who is an older Charles, says, I have since learned that no such world exists. In other words, it's the atheist who believes in illusion. But let's look at this now, because atheism is a Trinitarian religion. Nothing but 3 dimensions. Those 3 dimensions are triune. They're one. If you take any of those 3 dimensions away, the unity, the oneness, the wholeness of space collapses. It disappears. You have to have the 3 for the 1 to exist. So even in the physical cosmos, we are dealing with metaphysical mystery, with paradox. Now for us, that shouldn't be a surprise. If the creator of the cosmos is a Trinity, we would expect to have Trinitarian fingerprints smudged all over it. And we do. Because it's not just about space, it's about that other mysterious thing which atheists can't explain but clearly exists, time. The unity, the wholeness of time depends upon past, present, and future. If you take one of those away, the thing which is time collapses. Now, by the way, for God, without getting too complex here, that's not true. God exists beyond time. Everything is omnipresent. Everything is present to him. There's no past and no future for God. But that's not us. We are in something which we don't understand called time. We can only perceive it in terms of a past which has been, a present which is, and a future which will be. So even in the context of this atheistic microcosmos of materialism, there are two Trinitarian mysteries, 2 paradoxes. Now we look at the Trinity of the good, the true, and the beautiful, to go from the physical cosmos to that which transcends the physical cosmos, the so-called transcendentals, goodness, truth, and beauty. Now these are a Trinity because you can't separate them. Now, even the ancient Greek philosophers were getting the inkling of that ultimately at the core of the cosmos was not chaos, but oneness. And that oneness was goodness, truth, and beauty. The good is always true and beautiful. The true is always good and beautiful. The beautiful is always true and good. So those 3 transcendentals are themselves triune. But even more, they're a trinity of trinities. So let me explain. The good. Virtue. Love, caritas. It's this classic image we have of the Trinity. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, there has to be a lover, there has to be a beloved, a lover has to have a beloved, love has to have something to love, and there's the act of the love itself. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Love, beloved, and the act of love. Now, within the true, to understand the cosmos, you have to have the one who perceives, the object to be perceived, and the act of perception. For beauty, this is where I'm going to get a little bit controversial. I always try to be controversial because it's fun, without ever being heretical. Please God. But I believe that when Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he is saying, I am the good, the true, and the beautiful. Now, when God writes his signature, I am, we should listen. It appears various times, right? Not in the Gospel, in the Old Testament. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I see that as Christ saying, I am the good, the true, and the beautiful. I am what the Greek philosophers were seeking. I'm the way of goodness, the truth of reason, and the life of beauty. This is where I'm going to come from beauty. For me, beauty requires life. It requires the life of the beauty of the things being beheld. And by the way, that's not biological life necessarily. A sunset, a sunrise, a beautiful mountain, the Milky Way. There's a life in that, and the life that's in that is the living presence of the Creator, the work of art that you're looking at, the divine work of art, creation. But in order to see the beauty in that, in order to see the life in that, you have to have life in yourself. You have to be alive to perceive the life. So what you have, if you have this relationship between a beholder and the beautiful, is this living relationship. Let's go back now to Dante. Dante, the Divine Comedy. I don't want to shame anybody here. I'm tempted to put hands up, who here has read... Well, let's do it for fun. Who here has read the Inferno? Okay, keep your hands up. Who's read the Inferno? Keep your hands up if you've read the Inferno and the Purgatorio. Keep your hands up if you've read the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso. Well, actually, we've got a good hardcore there. That's good. But so often in the modern academy, we stay trapped in the Inferno. We get as far as hell. In fact, we go down to hell. We get as far as Satan, and then we stop. I think that's the end of the story. I don't think so. At the end of the story is when Dante finally beholds the beatific vision. And of course his words fail him. He can't communicate the beauty and the mystery of the beatific vision. But the two images that he comes at us with, what he sees, a Trinity and a man. Okay, so the Holy Trinity, God, and the Incarnation. So this understanding of both the Trinitarian and the Incarnational is at the heart of trying to understand what beauty is. So from the point of view of divine beauty, divine creativity, you have the Creator, you have the divine creativity, and you have the creature. So that's why Tolkien distinguishes between God as creator and man as sub-creator. Because God makes things ex nihilo, from nothing. We can't do that. We can only make things from other things that already exist. So a landscape artist will take trees, hills, perhaps a building, perhaps horses, sky, light, clouds, his hands, his eyes, an easel, canvas, oils or watercolours, brushes. All these things already exist, and he makes something new out of it. A work of sub-creation. So we are made in the image of God. We are the imago Dei, and that makes us lovers, the good, the way of goodness. It makes us seekers after truth, the truth, reason. But it also makes us givers of life. We can bring beauty into being, or sub-being, sub-creating. From other things that already exist, we can bring things into being. So Tolkien talks about a hierarchy of creative value. This hierarchy, right, by the way, I should say that what I do, this is like a footnote. Nobody read these footnotes in a talk, do they? But nonetheless, by way of a footnote, Tolkien doesn't talk about a hierarchy of creative value. If you read Tolkien looking for the phrase hierarchy of creative value, you'll be looking for a long while, because it's not there. This is me getting the grips of what he teaches in certain places, and I won't list those because we will be going off on a long tangent. So what I call, I've taught many times on Tolkien's philosophy of myth, so philosophia, the love of wisdom to be found in stories. So you could derive from Tolkien's teaching this hierarchy of creative value. At the top is the creator, is God. Below that is creation. Those things made directly by God ex nihilo. And below that is subcreation. Those things made by us from other things that already exist. And then I say that, and again, you get this from Tolkien as well, that subcreation can also be divided into two levels. True art, which is giving back to the giver of the gift, the fruits of the gift given. So true art should be an act of worship. And then there's art, creativity, subcreation, to the utility of man, for the use of man. And that's sometimes called technology. And I was actually giving a talk once, I can't remember what it was on, it was in Lisbon in Portugal. And I talked about this hierarchy of creative value. Creator, sub-creator, sub-creation to the glory of God, and sub-creation for the use of man. And when I said that, there was some sniggering and mumbling and whispering and laughing in the audience. Now, if you're giving a talk, there's two things you don't want to happen. One is you tell a joke and nobody laughs. That's not good, right? The other is you don't tell a joke and everybody laughs. So I said, so what's so funny? I mean, I wasn't aware that talking about this hierarchy of creative value was particularly amusing. It's lost on me. So one of the students put their hands up and said, well, you talk about this hierarchy of creative value, creator, creation, subcreation of the glory of God, subcreation of the use of man. This is an engineering school. And I put them all at the bottom of the heap. But I said, this is a hierarchy of goods. I said, we're all wearing clothes, thanks be to God. Right? We have heating. What we have in this room, by the way, we obviously have architecture we have in this room, and thank you, where you actually have that utility, subcreation for the use of man. We don't want the ceiling falling on our heads, right? We've got to have the mathematics in place. But beauty, it doesn't have to be ugly, it doesn't have to be functional, it could be a work of beauty as well. Bring the two together. All right, now, to be controversial again. Sounds reasonable enough, put God at the top, put, man using his gifts for just for comfort at the bottom. But there's a way that we can improve upon God's creation. We can make God's work better. And I'm going to explain that by way of telling a story. Once upon a time, because all best stories start with those words. Once upon a time, there was a rock. And it was a really beautiful rock. But nobody had ever seen it. Because for millions of years, this rock was buried under the ground. But it was beautiful. Then one day, someone using subcreation for the use of man, technology, dug the rock up. And it could now be seen. And some people with eyes that have life in them could see the life in the rock. And they said, that's a beautiful rock. Then someone came along who had more life in them than the others and could see more life in the rock than the others and said, that's not a beautiful rock, that is the beautiful rock. And this person takes the rock away, does things with it. Today, if you go to Rome and you cross the threshold of St. Peter's Basilica and turn to the right, the first side altar on the right, you will see Michelangelo's Pieta, with the mother of Christ cradling her crucified son in her lap. That's what that person did with that rock. And ever since then, people see that statue. They're moved to prayer, in some sense, as long as they have life in them. So they can see the life in the rock, even if they're atheists, even if they're Muslims. Because the definition of prayer is to lift up your mind and heart to God. Being in the presence of beauty that tells a story, and particularly that particular story of a mother and son, and the son being the innocent victim of the sins of others, lifts our minds and hearts to God. This is the power of the life that's in beauty and in art. So I want to continue now, keeping up the Trinitarian theme of beauteous truth, goodness, truth, and beauty, by looking at who we are. I'm going to begin by who we're not. We are not Homo sapiens. That's the modern label for us. It's about 200 years old. Earliest known use of that label for us, early 19th century. And it's a very stupid name for us, because Homo sapiens means wise man. Now, if you know anything at all about human history, we are not defined as a species by our wisdom. Every generation makes the same mistakes as every other generation, because no generation learns the lessons from previous generations. At this point, with the wealth of civilization, the great books, we have 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom to draw from. And yet every generation thinks it knows better. You can call that lots of things, but wisdom's not one of the things you would call it. So Homo sapiens is a silly label for us, a supercilious label given to us by a supercilious generation that called itself the Enlightenment. Think about that. Before we came along, there was no light. Let there be light, says the Enlightenment. Before us was nothing but the Dark Ages, darkness, superstition. Then we come along. The other name it gave to itself, the Age of Reason. So before we came along, no one could reason. No Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas. Nobody could reason till we came along with our light. It was those people that said that we were wise, because they were stupid. And a more modern label for us, which is as stupid, is Homo economicus. We only exist to be cogs in the mechanism of the market. We need to be good cogs in the wheel. We have to be good producers and good consumers. That's our purpose. Not that. So let's go back to older understandings. There's 3 older understandings of who we are that connected to the good, the true, and the beautiful. The first is the Greek name for us, anthropos, where we get words like anthropology, the Greek word for man. And etymologists argue about the meaning of that word, but Plato says, and he's good enough authority for me, so I'm quoting him authoritatively. Plato says, anthropos means he who turns upwards. So we are defined as those who turn upwards. And the way that I define that is, I try to distinguish, is the animal grazes, but man gazes. The animal is confined by instinct and appetite. We have those things, of course, but we can transcend those things and look up and gaze in wonder and enunciate some of the most profound words of deep philosophy ever uttered. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. That's childlike wisdom none of us should ever lose. So, anthropos, he looks up in wonder. That's what we are. And again, this is what I call the 5 metaphysical senses, which I take from the Summa Theologica by Aquinas. But again, don't look for the 5 theological senses, 5 metaphysical senses in Aquinas. That phraseology, you won't find it. If you look up what Aquinas says about dilatatio, you'll get where I'm getting this from, just a way of expressing it. So basically, what Aquinas shows us, and this is anthropos at work, how anthropos works or how anthropos is meant to work, is the 5 metaphysical senses are sequential, not like the 5 physical senses which work together. They're sequential. It begins with humility. That's the first. If we have humility, we would have the fruit of humility, which is a sense of gratitude. If we have a sense of gratitude, our eyes will be opened in wonder. If our eyes are opened in wonder, we will be moved to contemplation. And it's only once we move to contemplation that we experience dilatatio, dilation, the opening of the mind and the heart into the fullness of the real. So through that process of the 5 metaphysical senses, we can engage on a deep level with the reality that's out there, the goodness, truth, and beauty of reality. Humility, gratitude, wonder, contemplation, dilation. Anthropos. However, there's another name for us, Homo superbus. It's not Greek like anthropos, Latin, Homo superbus, proud man. Superbia being the sin of pride. I'll tell you another story to illustrate this. I'm not going to begin this with Once Upon a Time because this begins like some other really good stories begin. A Catholic, a Protestant, and a Jew. And an atheist, for an atheist and for good measure, and a Muslim go into a field in the middle of the night. And it's dark. Can't see anything. They all sit down in the middle of the field and they're facing east. And at some point, some light begins to appear on the horizon. And then perhaps even a little glimmer of red, possibly. And then this white disc rises. And you can look directly at it. The Catholic at this point might see some metaphor or symbol of the elevation of the host at Mass. The others won't see that. But they're all seeing this white disc rise. And then at some point, the white disc turns red. And you still gaze at it directly. The Catholic might be thinking, well, we've gone from the joyful mysteries, the white, to the sorrowful mysteries, the red. But they all see this change of colour of the disc they're looking at as it gets higher. And then it turns to gold. And you have to avoid your eyes. It becomes too glorious. It becomes a glorious mystery. All of those five, irrespective of their philosophy and theology, insofar as they have humility, gratitude, and a sense of wonder, will be moved to contemplation, and they will experience dilation. They will say, it is good for us to be here. Now tell the same story, but there's a sixth person. So it's the Catholic, the Protestant, the Jew, the atheist, the Muslim, and Gollum. So Gollum also goes out, he's happy, he likes the dark. So Gollum's happy to go out with them all, and they all sit down in the field, and all facing east. And it starts to get a bit light on the horizon, and Gollum gets somewhat uncomfortable. The first sight of the white disc rising, he scurries off to find a cave in which to hide. But we can all Gollumize ourselves. If instead of having humility, we have the absence of humility, which is the technical definition of the word pride. If we have pride, if we are homo superbus, we have pride, we will not have a sense of gratitude. We'll have a sense of cynicism. We don't have a sense of gratitude, we will not have our eyes opened in wonder. They'll be closed shut in upon ourselves narcissistically. We'll be reinventing the cosmos in our own image rather than seeing what's there. We won't be moved to contemplation, we'll be moved to narcissistic navel-gazing. And we'll experience no dilation, but merely the darkening of the smallness of ourselves, which gets smaller the more we think it's getting bigger. We're shriveling and shrinking, we're Gollumizing ourselves. This is homo superbus. And the sobering thing is that we are all both anthropos and homo superbus. As Dostoevsky says, as Solzhenitsyn says, the battle between good and evil takes place in each individual human heart. There's a civil war in society because there's a civil war in ourselves. And we have to be aware of that. And we can't defeat the dragon, which is our Gollumized self, homo superbus, without help, supernatural assistance, what theologians call grace. We can't do it ourselves. We have to have a relationship with the living God. Anthropos, he who looks up in wonder. Homo superbus, he who refuses to look up in wonder. And then the third definition of who we are is homo viator, man on a journey, man on a quest, man on a pilgrimage, pilgrim man. Each of our lives has a purpose and a goal, and it's the same goal for all of us. We are here in order to get to heaven. That's the purpose of life's journey. And if each of our lives is a journey, each of our lives is a story, where we are called to go on that quest, eyes wide open in wonder and praise, being aware of the existence of dragons, most of which live inside ourselves, and asking for help from our God and our neighbour to slay the dragons that we may actually achieve the quest. Homo viator. Now, the third thing I want to talk about, does anybody, by the way, I forgot to bring a prop with me. Does anybody have a hat of any description? I just take the, oh, there we go, this man's got up, it's faster than you. Huh?
No, that one came from the English side.
Perfect, thank you. All will be revealed presently. So we have here this understanding of God as a Trinity, understanding creation as being Trinitarian, both physically and metaphysically. We have understanding of ourselves as those who have to what? As anthropos. We are called to be Trinitarian. We're called, anthropos needs to love. Right? He needs to put himself last and put the other first. He has to practice the first shall be last shall be first. That's the definition of love. Because anthropos sacrifices himself for others. Homo superbus sacrifices others for the self. And that's all there is. But to sacrifice ourselves for others means we have to be the lover. The other needs to be the beloved, even if the beloved is our enemy. And the act of self-sacrifice is the act of love. Anthropos has to be practiced, this Trinitarian reality. We also are called, the Catholic Church always insists on the indissoluble marriage between fides et ratio, between faith and reason. We are called to come to a knowledge of the truth. And that means we have to have the humility to get out of the way so that we can perceive what's there objectively. Because what's the absence of humility? It's pride. And I mentioned various great philosophers, but I haven't mentioned one of the greatest ever, Jane Austen. And Jane Austen writes a book called Pride and Prejudice, which is all about pride and prejudice. Then what she shows us is there's an inseparable connection between the two. That pride is prejudiced. Pride doesn't see what's really there because it blinds itself with its own arrogance and ignorance. That we have to attain humility in order to see what's really there in the other. So we have to practice goodness, we have to practice truth through reason as the means of getting the truth. And then we have to have life in us to see beauty, to live beauty, to be beauty, and to make beautiful things. So the good, the true, and the beautiful, homo anthropos, homo superbus, homo viator. But there's a fourth thing. We made an image of God. In a way, in some ways, without being too controversial here, hopefully, everything in creation is made in the image of God, in the sense that God imagined it, right, and brought it into being. God imagined the first oak tree, and he's now made others. But when we say with the Imago Dei, we mean we're made in the image of God in a way which is different from mere creatures. There's something that's not merely creaturely about us, as a reflection of God's creativity. There's something divine about us. We're the Imago Dei in the sense that we are an image of the divine. Which means we have to have certain characteristics of the divine that we don't see anywhere else. So we do have to love as God loves. We are meant to know. Science, reason, is a way of getting to God. Truth ultimately is divine. And then we have to have the life of beauty. But the fourth thing, well, Chesterton's good at this. The Imago Dei in us. We're sub-creators, we're reasoners, we're lovers, but we also have a sense of humour. And at the end of Orthodoxy, GK Chesterton says there's one thing that Christ never revealed to us when he walked on earth, something which he kept secret from us when he went up into the mountains to pray by himself. And I sometimes wonder whether it was his mirth, laughter. No other creature laughs. Hyenas might sound like they're laughing, but it's fake. Fake laughter, like fake news, right? It's not true. We laugh. There's something divine in laughter. Do we not think that the gospel, which means good news, should not make us laugh? Do we not think that heaven is not just happy ever after, but happy ever laughter? Chesterton practiced what he preached, by the way. You know, when I talk his mirth about his girth. And one of my favourites is during World War I, a woman came up to him, and he's in an omnibus, and says, "Sir, why are you not out at the front?" And Chesterton says, "Madam, go round to my side and you will see that I am." Which is actually a perfect riposte, because I have this image of Chesterton, you know, being in the trenches of World War I, and it's time to go over the top. They have to get the crane out to winch him out. And then, you know, he gets up and he's got this huge target here. He can't really be missed. And then he waddles across no man's land. I mean, it'd be really effective weapon against the enemy. So it's a perfect response, but done with humour. And that's why I want to give you a little bit of humour here. Because this is Fides et Ratio, faith and reason, but it's also, it's done with great humour. So this is a miracle in itself. There was a disciple of George Bernard Shaw called Holbrook Jackson, and he wrote a book called Platitudes in the Making, and it was published. And by some miracle, Chesterton's personal copy with Chesterton's handwritten responses to these relativistic aphorisms was discovered. It was discovered in San Francisco, which is bizarre in itself, which happens to be where Ignatius Press has its headquarters. So this was given to Ignatius Press, they published it as Platitudes Undone. But this is some Chesterton's riposte. So what I'm going to do here, when I'm wearing a hat, it fits well, thank you. You may not get this back. You may not get this back. Normally when I wear a hat, it's sort of falling off my head because it doesn't fit properly. So when I wear the hat, I'm Chesterton, and when I take the hat off, I'm Holbrook Jackson, okay? And here we really get, I would say what being fully human is. Be contented when you have got all you want. Till then, be happy. Don't think, do. Do think, do. A lie is that which you don't believe. This is a lie. So perhaps you don't believe it. As soon as an idea is accepted, it is time to reject it. No, it is time to build another idea on it. You're always rejecting and you build nothing. Truth and falsehood in the abstract do not exist. Well, then nothing else does. Truth is one's own conception of things. The big blunder. All thought is an attempt to discover if one's own conception is true or not. No two men have exactly the same religion. A church, like society, is a compromise. The same religion has the two men. The sun shines on the evil and the good, but the sun does not compromise. This one's one of my favourites. Only the rich preach content to the poor, when they are not preaching socialism. In a beautiful city, an art gallery would be superfluous. In an ugly one, it is a narcotic. In a real one, it is an art gallery. Negations without affirmations are worthless and impossible. Theology and religion are not the same thing. When the churches are controlled by the theologians, religious people stay away. Theology is simply that part of religion that requires brains. We are more inclined to regret our virtues than our vices, but only the very honest would admit this. I don't regret any virtues except those I have lost. Every custom was once an eccentricity. Every idea was once an absurdity. No, no, no. Some ideas were always absurdities. This is one of them. No opinion matters finally except your own, said the man who thought he was a rabbit. Yes, indeed. To GK Chesterton. But there you get basically, this other aspect of the image of God in us, the sense of humour, and what a great way actually to be a servant of goodness, truth and beauty. How do you debunk the nonsense of relativism? With humour, right? So, Chesterton said, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. Right? There's a place for levitas as well as gravitas. And in fact, too much gravitas without enough levitas is dangerous, because Chesterton also said that the devil fell by the force of his own gravity. Pride is taking ourselves far too seriously, thinking that we make up the rules of the cosmos. We make it up as we go along. We are God. It precedes a fall. So those who put themselves first will be last. And those who put themselves last will be first. The contradiction is actually an exact science. The humble shall be exalted. This is the glory of humility. I'm going to finish with the greatest philosopher of all, Bono of U2. In the song Mysterious Ways, there's the wonderful line, if you want to kiss the sky, you better learn how to kneel. If we want to get to heaven, and if we want to be larger than life, we need to spend our life on our knees. Thank you.